2020 is not gonna count. I think it's the opposite. It's gonna count. It's gonna count for a lot.
I would say the story of kind of Neil and Naughty Dog is as much a story about the entire studio and their talent to bring these characters to life.
We have to bring ourselves into the work, bring the little pieces of creativity and reference that only we have, right? That only we were able to get from our unique life.
Something that I've learned with a little bit of time and maturity is like, not everything has to be the way that I want it.
I love this concept, this Buddhist, Japanese concept called Shoshin, and it's the beginner's mind. Well, Angel, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, this is great.
Angel, Leo.
Hey, Angel, nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you, Leo.
Looking forward for our chat. This is gonna be great. I mean, we're just gonna chat, man. Like, I have loads of questions. I don't know much about you, man. Tell us about how you started your creative career, where you started, where you grew up.
Sure.
How that shaped your creative vision.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, thanks for inviting me on this. This is really cool. So my name is Angel Garcia. I grew up in Orange County. My dad's a Puerto Rican American from New York, kind of a rough guy, Vietnam veteran. My mom's an immigrant from Mexico who came here originally illegally and became a U.S. citizen. She's got a big family. We kind of grew up in Orange County. I'm the oldest of four. And growing up in Orange County was great. It was just like any other suburb, it's like, it was like the peak of surf and skate culture and punk culture. And so as a young kid, I went from like listening to 50s music to like heavy metal, all while listening to like the Bookies and Menudo. Like I was just like in love with music, like young Ricky Martin and like Mexican TV, dude. I didn't know English till first grade, so El Chapulín Colorado was like my favorite kid show.
Oh, dude. Yeah. We watched that back in Brazil too, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just found out when I was in Sao Paulo, I found out it's huge there. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. El Chapo, huge.
And Menudo was the biggest band of the 80s, no question. So it's crazy to think, but yeah.
So yeah, it's like I was in this weird place because I grew up with like a lot of like that diversity of like music and culture and stuff like that. But like, Orange County was like peak surf skate culture. And like, I was growing up in like although we were like very blue collar and like lower middle class, like I went to an upper middle class high school, because my dad had an East Coast mentality that like school and where you went to school really mattered, in the sense of like, and it actually probably paid off. But, growing up in Orange County, obviously I ended up getting into like heavy metal and punk music and hardcore music. So all the other like Hispanic kids at school, that were kind of going through the same thing I did. We all became like punk shows, and we started like a magazine together with like, newsprint and selling ads to like the laundromat to pay for like printing. And we would do like photography of punk shows and hardcore shows in Anaheim. Got this place called Chain Reaction. And, like that punk culture, I think mixed with my love of like art and drawing and just like design, entertainment and games, like I had all this stuff and I didn't know how to focus it for such a long time. And I think that like living in a graphic design studio or like the art, I forgot what it's called, there was like the like printing, essentially like you could make screen prints in high school. There's a class where you could make screen prints, stickers and everything, and it was at peak like Shepherd Ferry actually. So the poster behind me I've had for 30 years, and it was I had a friend who was working, his father was working at Rusty, who was kicking off Shepherd Ferry's like clothing line, I think, like the Hoya group. And he kind of got me this poster and, like got me kind of close to Shepherd Ferry when I saw him at this art show called Beautiful Losers in Orange County. And that kind of blew my mind. So that was the first time all my interests kind of aligned, but it's like music, games, like art, like skate and punk culture, design. I was like, they all can live together. Like they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And that kind of changed my life. And I've had this poster my whole life, and it's always been by my workspace because it reminds me of like kind of trying to be honest to the things I love and staying true to my passions, right? It's like, so I'll speed things up. I eventually go to college and I bumble around. Like I was not ready to be kind of like self-motivated or guided. There was no kind of blueprint. When my dad passed away in high school, the blueprint for how to like navigate college or go to college wasn't there for me. My mom, like, although very studious and like really good in school, hadn't had a traditional kind of university experience. And so I didn't know what to do. So I was left like to my own devices, and it caused me to kind of bounce around and live like I lived a really full life in my 20s at the expense of like my education. Like I had a lot of great experiences and a lot of crazy stories. But my education kind of took a backseat. And I mean that in the sense of like, I was only willing to live in the art building. I wasn't willing to really do anything else. And so I was getting a really cool education from a lot of awesome people who were taking me under their wing and taking me to like art shows in New York. And like, there was a really influential guy named Ed Gardina who essentially told me to leave the Art Institute in Orange County because he's like, yo, you're too smart. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you need to leave this school. And he was part of an art collective called Finishing School that was like doing really cool, edgy design and like art stuff. And then I kind of fumbled around, eventually had to get a paycheck. And I was taking kind of freelance jobs and ended up working at Hurley and doing freelance work for Hurley and Billabong. And then, Nike bought out Hurley, laid off everybody. I went to go work for an action sports company called Troy Lee and helping run their retail store and doing freelance design. At the same time, it was like peak recession. I was like bartending at the same time. I was just being super scrappy and trying to design my way out of poverty. So, and then I had a friend who was he's been my friend since like we were kids. He was also a really talented designer. I still think he's like way amazing. His name is Dan Perez. He gave me a heads up about a position open at Activision. And I ended up working where I interviewed and I prayed to every god in the universe that I would get the job. I didn't even ask how much I was making. And I eventually got the job at Activision, being kind of like the design lead on Call of Duty for like marketing and kind of internal creative. And then, so that team was really small. Like, I think it was 8 people, maybe max. Not even only work, like the Call of Duty team was maybe 2 people. When I say 8 people, I mean the entire Creative Art Services department was 8 people. And I think, I was pretty ambitious and came with a lot of like ideas, and I really loved Call of Duty. So I used that fandom to like motivate myself into partnering with marketing partners who are now some of my closest friends. And we made cool stuff happen. I think there was a really thirst to make things that people were proud of and that we were all proud of. And then through that kind of partnership and some good leadership from my managers, like we scaled that department, and now it's the biggest department at Activision. And they're no longer called art services. I think they call it like creative services or marketing services. And, like I learned a lot about myself and honed a lot of my design for how I think about marketing for games and designing for games at Activision. It was kind of like my college. And I met a lot of great people there that I'm still very close with. I met my wife there, kind of a taboo thing now probably. But, it's like I owe a lot to that time. And I had such a great experience, like I got, my first real award for design at Activision for designing like the cover of ESPN that featured Marshawn Lynch, and for Black Ops 4 or 3. And, like I owed a lot, but, just like anything else, you get burnt out after a certain amount of time. Like video games, especially working on Call of Duty, is very, very demanding on your time. And there was a really good opportunity at Naughty Dog heading up all their kind of like marketing and merchandising and design, as well as like doing additional design for like, filling in here and there. It became like working at Naughty Dog was a much different experience. I had a lot more personal ownership and like personal involvement in the game itself rather than just the marketing. So working at Naughty Dog was cool in the sense of like, it was working with at a family business where if you could fill in and help out, they were willing to take that help, and you were working with, and I think that the thing about working at Naughty Dog is that some of the most talented people I've ever worked with in my life, and I had such strong imposter syndrome for so long because, I'm here designing like a logo and adjusting, like logo placements and packaging for like XYZ product. And then, across from me is like some of the best concept artists of all time, like Aaron Lamonic and Eitan Zana and Robbie Johnson, all these guys who are just like shaping reality. I'm over here like pushing pixels. So like I had to kind of get over that quickly, which is I still kind of struggle with, but and then I did that for 2.5 years and I was dead set. I launched the Uncharted Lost Legacy and kind of finished up a bunch of stuff for Uncharted 4. That was in kind of in the mix, part of the roadmap. And then, we were working on Tilo though, almost simultaneously as Uncharted Lost Legacy. And then I got a random email that I thought was spam. And it was Facebook. And I thought it was like fake. I literally thought it was just like some clickbait thing.
Can I just say I had the exact same experience, and I'll let you finish, but yes, that's the approach.
Yeah, I was like, fb.com. I was like, that's a fake email, like fb.com. That's so weird. And so I gave it a shot, and I talked to someone, and I was like really skeptical. Like I was really like, nah, I'm not into it, but I'm going to hear him out. And, I continued the process, and like, I looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, how immature and how unrealistic, like I was so, being on the inside, no, it's so funny, but like, I had this attitude of like, I showed up to my interview in like a t-shirt and denim jackets and jeans and chucks. And I was just like, yeah, love me as I am, Facebook. Like, this is who I am. I'm this gamer guy and like game industry dude. And I'm like here to design. And like, if you don't like me, that's fine. I'll go finish my game that I love. Right. It's like, I had the unique freedom that maybe most people don't have the luxury of, but I'm very aware that I had that for sure. And, one thing led to another. They described kind of what they had in mind and what the responsibility was, and I really kind of drilled people on it. Like I was really serious about like, hey, is this real? Like, this is my life, right? This is not just a job. Like, this is my passion. Like, my identity is uniquely tied to like what I do for a living and loving it. And they were very reassuring, and I kind of like felt it out. And like I was like, well, life doesn't always line up. As much as I would have loved to launch The Last of Us, I felt like I had a lot of the core work done with like finishing the console, doing a lot of the marketing art, doing a ton of work putting into it and teaming up with people. I felt like I was okay to leave, even though I had never left a game while it was in mid-cycle. But like the opportunity to work on something global on a giant brand like Facebook, and have a sincere influence on trying to make it better for people like me or new gamers or streamers and content creators, like, and be competitive. That for me, like, I was like, well, I can't pass that up, and I think that was for me I had to make an adult decision. And it's something that like has paid out for me in the sense of like, I've been very fortunate to like have a lot of great experiences in my time here. That doesn't say there isn't like things that could be better. It's just like any place that you work. No place is a utopia. Obviously we're dealing with like a lot of issues that affect gaming, a lot of things that affect gaming that may not have direct impact on gaming. I'll say that. But, I'm very fortunate to have a job that I can exercise all my passions, affect things and witness things on a global scale, and have a pretty good life-work balance. And I meet guys like you, super interesting people, like all the time. This place is so big that it's like, it's really cool to have, like, who gets filtered through here,
And I have the topics that we kind of been putting
Right.
on paper here on the side, so we can kind of look through this. But before I try to get to the first one, how are you guys doing? How's everybody feeling? COVID world craziness. As my lead today said, we're going through a pandemic and a revolution at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I have less of a problem with the pandemic and the revolution and more with like the like willing ignorance, right? Like that's
Mm,
how that's like the willing like people just like not willing to like
Accept
check
change.
their yeah accept change or like check their own insecurities at the door, right? Like we shouldn't have a huge debate about masks, right, for safety. Like it shouldn't be like a like like an issue that separates people or becomes politicized. It should just be like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta wear masks to keep people safe and keep my my family safe. I think that's harder to swallow. I mean, also the revolution stuff. Like, I live on Miracle Mile, and when LA, was had that movement happened. I had a lot of friends out there, and I was trying to juggle, supporting them and also and being part of that movement, and also trying to juggle a job and a husband, and trying to like do all that, and it gets overwhelming. That this year's a lot for people. I think that no one's going to walk away unscathed for sure. In some kind of psychological way or physical way. Um, I've tried to stay positive about it in a way of like, I try to look at this year as like a free education for everybody, right? Like,
yeah.
I think we all are going to learn a little bit more about ourselves and the world around us and the people that we care about or love and how we interact with the world. So, in that regard, I'm trying to be positive about it.
Yeah, I think, and one thing people keep saying, oh, let's write off 2020. 2020 is not gonna count. I think it's the opposite. It's gonna count. It's gonna count for a lot for for the things you just said. It's gonna come out of 2020 different people, different society.
Yeah.
Hopefully for better.
Yeah.
You told us up to the point where you went to Naughty Dog and you worked there. How does it, how did it transition like from working at a studio to working in a tech company now?
Working at a tech company, I mean, to be perfectly honest, is incredibly difficult transition. Way more than I thought it was going to be. It was incredibly uncomfortable because of how vast the company is and how like there's a lot of boundaries and a lot of people running in different directions, like with different like goals. And so like when you come from a place where everybody in the building and their name and like what their kids are and like what they're eating for lunch, and you'll have lunch together or coffee, and you go with a big place where everybody has different goals, and it's like I joined like a city. It's like I didn't change companies or move studios. I like joined a new town, like a new city, and I had to become acclimated to like what the how the streets worked and like what the politics were, like who's the governor, who are the mayor of this town, like, and there's clearly different borders in that, and that I still deal with some of that culture shock. Like I've been here about the same time as Antonio, and like I'm still dealing with some things that I like refuse to kind of like like accept as reality. Like I feel like those are still there are still cultural things that I feel I can still try to improve as part of my job here, at least working on the gaming team, which is, I'm really fortunate because it's such a great scrappy team. Like I'm really fortunate to have some of the best managers I've ever had here, and people. They're just really good, really great people. But yeah, it was really hard. I mean, to be perfectly honest, like my transition was really difficult and I got really depressed for a while. And then I got so busy that I didn't have time to be depressed, and I was actually found my groove, right? Like I found out that I have like a toxic relationship to like workload, and I love a healthy, busy workload. It makes me feel like launching a game, like I'm launching a game. And last year before COVID, I was, we were doing these global events, and it had a very similar kind of that dopamine kind of rush as like being in a launch cycle for a game, that same press cycle. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is my comfort zone. I love this.
Angel, I don't know how it worked for you. Like, I'm not super close to like how things work in terms of the design side. in like in a gaming production company versus what you're doing at Facebook right now?
Oh, right, yeah.
Like what sort of like what did you have to do? What did you have to create? For when you're working with games, and like what's the difference now when you're at Facebook?
I'm fortunate to have like kind of worked almost the full funnel in the sense of like I've been at a publisher, I've been at a studio, and now I'm at a platform that hosts publishers and creators, right? And studios. So it's like at a publisher, like on a Call of Duty, for example, when I worked on Call of Duty, it was a lot around like that department worked a lot on cost savings in the sense of like providing an internal agency like, not an exact like agency model, but an agency like kind of service in the sense of like, a lot of what we had to do was assist the marketing team by creating art assets, but also relieving the studio burden when it came to making some things, right? So our department made like trailers to like ads, digital ads, microtransaction like creative that would live on like the Sony store, like first party stores or like Xbox, to making like assets for the in-game store as well. And that could also mean like anything that you would need to kind of market and sell a game right on a global way. That's kind of what a publisher or what that publisher creative would look like. It also at Activision, which was very different from working at Sony or Sony and Naughty Dog, they would also kind of handle the idea of like creating a custom console, right? Like the Last of Us custom console is not the first PlayStation I've made. I made the one for Black Ops 3 as well.
I own that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So that one's got a funny story I'll tell you sometime. But yeah, so like on a publisher level, yeah, you're creating a lot of assets, screenshots, marketing material, backup box, like you're helping plug into that marketing plan. On a studio level, it worked on a Naughty Dog working with Sony works a little differently. Sony has a really strong kind of creative team internally. So as a marketer, like as a person, a designer and kind of in charge of kind of providing similar services that I would normally provide to the marketing team at Naughty Dog, I was in charge of like really making sure that I was representing the studio. So like as kind of like the creative internally handling marketing and merchandising, as a kind of the design lead, I was in charge of making sure that the studio was represented accurately and that it met the quality standards of the studio, whether that meant creating original assets for licensing, right? Because licensing demands are really high. Like licensing in both companies always needs a ton of stuff, right? Because they need to be able to use it across multiple surfaces, notebooks, globally. That was a huge demand, but also like I needed to also iterate and work with marketing partners to make sure that key art was made on time, that packaging, working with partners around at Sony would work on packaging. Like I worked with a really, really great partners to make the PlayStation, and they worked on anything else hardware or kind of packaging related. This guy, Leo and Belinda, who, if they ever hear this, thank you. Like I couldn't have done it without you guys. And thanks for taking care of my baby when I was gone, because, that PlayStation meant the world to me. But, it's different, like in the sense of like at Activision as part of like a creative services team and managing that kind of like part, or, the Call of Duty team and esports, like some of the franchises I was in charge of, like that was more about like partnering with the marketing teams to create assets to help market that game towards like their marketing plan. Whereas at Naughty Dog, I took the different perspective in the sense of like, I'm there representing the studio in their best interest to make sure that we're coming up with the best designs possible to provide the marketing team opportunities for like cool things, like a really cool design for a custom console, cool key art. I spent a lot of time coordinating like marketing demands at Naughty Dog. So like making sure that, like the concept artists knew ahead of time when we needed character art and that we needed full body character art because we needed it for multiple crops. And if we like, they only do up to the waist, then we don't have legs. And then we have to do a billboard and then we have to do it later and it doesn't match. And it's like all these things to consider, like, first party art submissions, some stuff that's like very consistent. I think, the thing about both companies that's very similar is that, and kind of one of my favorite things about working in games is that there's an inherent camaraderie when you're all working towards the same goal, and sometimes have to work under extreme conditions to get to the finish line. I think that it doesn't leave a lot of room for people with like ulterior motives, right? You have to be kind of like come at it very honest and like with your best self. I think those are the only people that really make it, because everyone's kind of in the trenches with you, and you're all trying to run towards the same end place. I don't know. I've had a pretty good experience. Does that answer the question? It's like it varied responsibilities. It's just different perspectives, but tackling kind of the same challenges.
Yeah, I had like one follow-up question, like
Sure.
just because like I'm very curious about the world of key art. I sort of like I met a few people in the movie industry, like people who make posters and stuff, and how that world is so that world like it's a little bit similar to how we work in advertising, but we're like completely separate, like a different world. How does it work with key art in the gaming business? Do you guys ever go outside? Is that art and that design created by the publisher or by the studios? How does that work?
So there's two different methods that I've witnessed, right? So for Call of Duty, they had more of a traditional advertising approach where they would team up with an agency, and the agency would kind of get an early preview of the game and some kind of maybe character models, some general asset pack. And then they would have like a full-on photo shoot, models, like props made, and then have like a photo, a whole process to kind of get a real kind of fleshed out piece of artwork, and then or multiple versions, right? Multiple concepts. And in the studio and the publisher would kind of initially like whittle those down to what they like best and what's best suited for them, right? And so that's kind of like the process is kind of more of that traditional high-end advertising on Call of Duty, right? It's like a premium, that AAA kind of game experience. Naughty Dog was really hands-on, and Sony was really like cool with that in the sense of like Naughty Dog was very hands-on with the development of their key art because they are closest to kind of like what they wanted and knew that they could execute that on a very high level. Also, frankly too, it's like it would have been very difficult for an agency to say, hey, Naughty Dog, like knowing Naughty Dog, it would have been very difficult for an agency to come to Naughty Dog and be like, hey, this is what we really think your game should look like for the cover. It's like you have a place where Naughty Dog is a place where everything is handcrafted. It's like everything is handcrafted, like their engine made internally. Like every tree, every rock is like meticulously placed and designed with purpose and love. And that comes with the key art. So like you have concept artists who are usually teaming up with people like me, marketing artists, or like a marketing person who are involved in meetings to kind of discuss like what the general idea of like what the cover should portray. Usually the final say at a place like Naughty Dog will be Neil and the art directors. But yeah, those are two kind of wildly different approaches that I've been able to witness. And I wouldn't say that either one is better than the other. I think it's just like what's best for them and their content.
Yeah, it's so interesting, man, to hear like how things work inside those places. Because like I'm one of the guys who only see like the big billboards and like in the key art on these massive boards outside and then on the games. Like wow, like this is great. Who makes that, man?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it's great. And how you told us up to the point where you went to Naughty Dog and you worked there. And I know like there was stuff you wanted to talk about, Antonio, when it comes to the relationship between the story of The Last of Us and what's happening now. I didn't play the game yet, man.
No spoilers. So spoiler-free analytical.
Don't worry about the spoilers.
No, yeah.
About the spoilers. Well, by the time I get to play this game, it's gonna be a few years down the line.
You know what?
To college.
You got to do it. My wife wanted to get ready for The Last of Us 2, so she watched someone who had cut or played through The Last of Us, but cut it like a movie. So they had, I mean, there's nothing like playing it, right? But like if you're limited on time and you really want to jump to the next one, there's some YouTube videos that do a pretty good job of like showing you a pretty condensed playthrough and playing it like a movie, and you'll get all the major points that way. You'll get the sentiment.
Yeah, I almost feel embarrassed trying to talk about it, having Andrew here who has had closeness to Neil. And just so you know, Leo, Neil Druckmann is I think vice president of Naughty Dog today, right? And he came out of I believe Carnegie School of Design, or I was just reading about his life story, but regardless of what school, right? This guy's like a serious kind of type as far as his writing goes. He's very much about creating kind of shock writing, I call it, which is like he leads you on this path of something good is going on and then always pulls the rug on you, which is just life, right? I think he portrays life better than most art that I've kind of experienced, even when you talk about like some of the best Hollywood movies somehow. But comes out of school and apparently just had this idea for a game where you'd kind of have to chaperone this little girl and the kind of vulnerabilities of that, which at the time was completely, I mean, this is probably like 15 years ago now, completely unheard of, and didn't really get to make that game, but got a job at Naughty Dog. Supposedly was gonna reboot Jack and Daxter, and goes to the boss and goes like, this is just not my cup of tea. I'm the very end opposite of this, and worked on some Uncharted stuff. But like this first game this guy ever writes, first game he wrote top to bottom, is now lauded as possibly the best game of all time, possibly one of the best pieces of art of all time, certainly the best interactive experience I can think of. So tell us more about this guy, man. It's insane. Very fascinated by Neil.
What do I say about Neil? Neil's an interesting guy. I know Neil as the guy that's really hard to find. Like Neil in the sense of like, anytime you needed to find Neil to get an approval, or it's a kind of an inside joke now, I guess, like a running kind of meme in the studio, is like Neil is really hard to find. Like he's always in another meeting, or he's not in his office, or he's in his office and you can't get away. He's a hard dude to track down because, you know, Neil was involved very heavily in almost every aspect of the making of The Last of Us too. He's an interesting guy. He's like, he loves games and he loves film. Like, to understand how, like, where the Last of Us 2 came from or Uncharted, you only have to look as far as like the movies that inspired those, you know, those games, right? Like, and how like they've done a beautiful job of connecting a human and real story. There was a really big emphasis while working on the game that like, you know, that things feel authentic and real, and that these were telling really genuine stories and not, you know, painting caricatures of people. You know, we want to tell about like what this world would really be in, you know, like John Sweeney, who's the art director, who's, you know, a good friend of mine, and he's just a solid guy. That poor guy has done more really authentic research around like what that world looks like, and to the point of like blood splatters to like trees and moss growth, like you know, Ashley Sawansky, who's the key character artist, Alex Nianakis, like all those people, like they've done an amazing job of like crafting really believable people and authentic stories down to like every detail of their clothes. And I think that if you talk about, you know, the way I like to think about it when people ask me about Neil, it's like Neil's like the captain of a very talented crew pirate ship, right? Like, and this crew of this ship is like the sickest and most talented set of like assassins on the planet. Like, and you know, like I think that every person in that studio contributes to the end goal of that story, right? Like I knew about the story though. I mean, I'm still very surprised because they've changed some elements of the story. So like I'm playing through and I'm like, oh, this is new. Like, where did this come from? So I'm really excited that I'm still being surprised. But like, you know, knowing the story, everybody gets input on that story. You know, everybody's very vocal about how that plays out because those characters, some people have been there 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. Like, and not about 30 years, but there's been people there that are really long time, like original crew. And, you know, so these characters and and their stories and the development, like it's a full it's a family matter for some of these people, you know, and the shaping of these characters and stories. So I would say the story of kind of Neil and Naughty Dog is as much a story about the entire studio and their talent to bring these characters to life. But Neil's also, like, you know, undeniably a really talented guy who's like been an amazing director, and you can hear, you know, any of like the voice actors and you know, tell you any kind of the stories from Neil from like the live shoots. But as I know him as a person, he's always been a really stand-up guy who's really been very direct and forthright about his opinions and what things are, and being authentic to like people and telling real stories. And I think that he's kind of delivered on that, right? In the sense of like a really cinematic experience for both like Uncharted, The Last of Us, and Last of Us 2, especially like most, I would say like maybe the most cinematic experience. So like Neil's kind of a mystery dude, but he was always like a, you know, like I would say like he's the culmination of a lot of really hard work, a lot of talented people, and he's kind of like the figurehead of that, you know. I think a guy who doesn't get enough credit as well is the sweet president. He's such a good guy, Evan Wells, who is like just patient dad of the studio. He's kind of a quieter guy, but he is just like a very patient guy with a really, you know, you could tell he's got a big heart. And that's a really reflective amongst the studio. You know, it's like just like, again, it's like some of the best people I've ever worked with, like around the world, from all over the world too, in every discipline.
Very cool. Yeah, the original thing we were going to talk about with Last of Us, which I think both of us can talk to a little bit, which is not so much the studio internal kind of mechanics, but this idea that there was no medium to kind of tell this kind of story before video games, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of the game directors out there, they'll say things like, even with the best movie or with the best kind of book that you really get immersed and you really feel like you understand those characters, you're never the character, right? At best, you can create an analogy for yourself, like, oh, I wish I was Batman, or I wish I was whoever. But then you get into video games, and especially the state they're in now, where the story is so interwoven with the gameplay, and it's so interwoven with even like the way they kind of promote the game ahead of time, so that you feel like this big blockbuster is coming, that there is no other way that I can think of where you are that protagonist yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And then he takes that and for a spin and goes, you know what if you were multiple protagonists? What if you never knew for sure which way to align? And I love this notion, because that pushes, games have done you are the protagonist thing for a long time now, over 20 years, but you know, even original Mario, but he goes, well, or Naughty Dog, I should say, you know, well, what if you could take on different aspects of different protagonists so that you can feel the kind of complexity of human beings, and the kind of, nobody's good or bad, right? And I joke around that even games that are lauded, and I love like Red Dead Redemption or GTA, all it takes is for you to wave at enough people that your bar goes from horrible person who killed 1 million to like the best guy in town. Yeah. And you know, and then he did that with the spoiler alert, did that with the cards, right, that you collect in the game. It's a very direct kind of like little Easter egg to like, this is not a game as you know it. This is a life that you're kind of living through.
I think one of my favorite things about it is that like the team really came through, and like, you know, like on a traditional, it's kind of what you said, it's like you play through a game and you're like slaughtering on the bad guys, and you're like, no consequences, I'm the good guy, I have impunity, no consequences. And then Last of Us 2 comes around and it's like, oh, actually no, there's consequences, and like here they are, and here's like all the repercussions of like all the things that you thought were true and all right, and like you thought you thought you were the hero. It's like, but there's consequences. Every person in this world is living and probably has a backstory, but you've disconnected so hard because you're in the mindset of a game, that you just like are doing things with impunity, right? Whereas like the first game and the second game really make you think about how you use every bullet, in the sense of like scarcity and resources, to like what you're building and like strategy and stealth. Like that's why these games reward stealth so much. It's because they really want you to value your life and the lives of the people around you, even the NPCs, right? Maybe the clickers not so much, but like but yeah, it's like the second game is definitely about this idea of like anger and revenge, and the idea of like judgment, and consequences. Like, the team has done such a good job of like, surmising what it's really been, the themes around the game. But it's like one of my favorite things is the idea of consequences, like that punishment for that gamer mentality of like, I'm a player, I'm gonna go and kind of like Westworld this up. It's like the idea of Westworld. It's like, there are no consequences. I'm just going to come here and use it as like my playground and leave. And then it's like, okay, well, what if these were sentient people? Like, what if you were truly this character? Would you really be as reckless with your life as you're acting? And would the people around you, like, who are they losing when you stab that person in the neck or shoot them in the face or whatever? So it's like, I like that mentality of like that you have to be very deliberate with your actions and thoughtful about them.
Yeah, it's such a difference. Like, you have this depth of thought in storytelling and in gaming, and how nowadays I feel, and this is like another subject, but like nowadays it feels like that gaming, and most of the games that are coming into our attention, apart from the big ones and like from the big studios, everything's sort of like going in a different direction, where they just want to like upsell you or something, or give you like a shot of dopamine without getting to a meaningful place. Is this a discussion, Angel, that happens within the gaming community a lot? That's something that people talk about, and like I imagine people at Naughty Dog, they don't want things to go the way they seem to be going, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the game industry is very different from the film, but maybe I think they follow similar patterns in the sense of like, there's like the blockbuster mega hits, right? And then there's going to be like the art films that really try to tell you something meaningful and lasting, and try to be kind of a classic, right? I think film is having maybe a harder time establishing classics like they did. Maybe it's because I'm like maybe getting a little older and like living in a little bit of a nostalgia, but like it feels like there are less classic movies being made now than when I was a kid. And maybe I'll have a different perspective in a couple of years from now when I get some distance from this decade. But I think with games, it's a little different. Like there's constantly people trying to iterate and tell new stories, and kind of really, I think it's also too because games, when you're trying to play like a single player game, you have to earn someone's time. You have to continuously earn their time. Like they have to kind of continue to progress and continue to feel rewarded, all while being told a really engaging story that, depending on the game, has varying levels of emotional value, right? From like, and that can be true from like a kid's game, like, like Ratchet and Clank or Skylanders, to like a more in-depth, like adult game, like The Last of Us 2. And even the recent Call of Duty kind of had some really good like themes, for like kind of more of a blockbuster thing. Like those games still kind of are Call of Duty, I give a lot of credit for. Modern Warfare 3 especially, it's like they're trying to kind of like grow up in a smart way. So I think that it's kind of has that varying things where I think the people in the game industry, especially people at Naughty Dog, want to tell important experiences and have them be meaningful and like important and innovative. And I think no one wants to make a bad game. I don't think anyone ever sets out like to make a bad game. It's a lot of people that for one reason or another, maybe the moons didn't align, but everyone's trying to make a fun experience that like wins audiences, right? Like and makes them feel deserving of their time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and it feels a lot like advertising too. Nobody wants to do shitty ads,
Yeah.
We're all trying to we're all trying to make like, great communication, entertaining, like, but yeah, I totally get that. It totally answers it. how, like in your creative journey, man, through all those cool places you worked at, the cool people you worked with, what are the things you learned about creativity, the things that help you be more creative, or that help a group be more creative?
That's a really good question.
It's deep, man.
Yeah,
It's a
like
deep
actually,
conversation.
yeah, like I had to sit back in my chair for that. Like, what are the things that I think help people be creative? I think that something that I've learned with a little bit of time and maturity is like, not everything has to be the way that I want it. Sometimes you have to understand the perspective of the people asking for it and what's important for them. And you have to check your own interests or perspective or opinion at the door and listen. And like a lot, you have to listen a lot and maybe work on communication and talk to people, ask a lot of questions. Like I find myself having better ideas from listening to people, learning more, kind of researching. I find that to be really inspiring and creative. And I think also like depending on what you're doing, like it's important to always be making things, right? It's like it's like you don't want to be you have to, you're a samurai and you got to keep your sword sharp. It's like, that's also true. Like I constantly even though I've been not the best at it, like during quarantine, I'm like, I'm going to learn 3D. I'm doing motion graphics. Like I'm doing my own like hype video / music video using like found footage and like laying in VFX over footage to get an idea across. And that's just for me to like have fun. That's like a fun project where I don't have to report to anyone, but it does influence the way that I do the work when I do work for like a marketing partner or a freelance thing. It's like those fun things help me inform the way that I like will proceed the work. But I guess in the TLDR is like, let's do more listening than talking and do research. Make sure you're still having fun, regardless if that's at work or outside of work. And if that fun means like learning new things or new skills, like keep adding to your equity. Like you as a person have value and you have to continuously add value and grow with whatever you're doing. But I think most people forget the value they inherently have.
Yeah, that's great, man. It's so true. Like I think this is true in any creative endeavor. We have to bring ourselves into the work, bring the little pieces of creativity and reference that only we have, right? That only we were able to get from our unique life. And that works for gaming, for design, for advertising, for whatever kind of creativity, for creating a business, or so on and so forth. Antonio, we're about, or should wrap up soon. Like anything else you wanted to chat about?
Not really. I'm aware of time too, but it was really great to actually chat. I feel like the beginnings of a real friendship here, because we have the common denominators of really caring about trying to output good things, being curious, and continuing to your point to try to hone our skills. And I love this concept, this Buddhist, Japanese concept called Shoshin, and it's the beginner's mind. And this idea that at any level of mastery that you achieve at anything in life, you can flip the coin and look at it as you're at the very beginning of whatever next level that might be. And so in that sense, there's infinite potential to keep growing, because you're always a beginner. Like no matter what you've achieved, say if you're the best archer in the world, well, now you're going to learn how to make your own arrows, right? And that kind of mentality where everything you accomplish is only a stepping stone to like a new door where you can kind of challenge yourself and grow. And so, yeah, that's definitely, what I feel like these conversations are starting to do. So I really appreciate, Leo, you starting this out. You have already been running an entire creativity pod on your own, pretty much, with the blog, with posts, with Instagram, and not this, and I appreciate it. So.
Yeah, thanks guys. This has been super special. It's nice to just kind of be able to like nerd out about games and design.
Totally. Angel, man, thank you for coming in and sharing your perspective and your story with us. It's so great to hear about people from other creative industries, you know, and how we're all creative. We all have sort of like similar experiences, and how creativity is important for us. And like Antonio said, we all want to do the best work we can. So thanks again for joining us, man.
No problem. It's a pleasure, and I really appreciate you guys' perspectives. Like I've watched a couple of the shows, and I really, you know, your talks on thoughtfulness and design and kind of that philosophy and like breaking down people's processes. Like it's like I get like this voyeuristic like glee out of it. I'm like, oh, that's like, oh, look at them, like that's how they also think like that too. So I really appreciate that, and like I hope everyone at Activision Naughty Dog isn't, you know, doesn't take anything I said out of context, or I hope, you know, I hope they know I love them to death, and loved my entire time there and everybody there. So,
all right,
but like one big homage from where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, guys. See you soon.
All right, everybody, take care. When this is over, let's have a beer, eh?
Yeah, please.
Absolutely.
All right, cheers.
Take care, guys.
Bye.